Good evening, stream viewers, and welcome to Paradox Live, a new streaming endeavor by us here at Paradox Interactive. My name is John Rickna, and I will be your host for the foreseeable future, taking you through this new kind of show format that we're doing. So today we're doing War of the Vikings, being followed up by Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings 2, mixed in with some giveaways and other interesting things. So going directly into it, we have Gordon van Dyke, executive producer for War of the Vikings, with me here today, sitting here, cocking his head, being groovy, dancing to the stream. How are you doing today, Gordon?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's a very sunny day here in Sweden, and you can clearly see this because we both have shorts, which is not usual in our...
Showing off our skinny legs.
So, we have recently released a new big content update for War of the Vikings called the Shieldmaiden updates. Could you tell me a bit about this?
Yeah, so the Shieldmaiden is a new class, which is just one of the few things that we've done. We added this new class because we really wanted a defensive class, and we wanted something that touched on the history and kind of some of it lore, some of it plausible, some of it there's evidence, and some of it there's historical things about the culture of the Norse culture that made us really think, you know what, let's put this new class in there. Let's make it a Shieldmaiden. Let's really highlight this and have a really kick-ass female character in our game, because we do have a lot of female players. And on top of that, we also added the ability where you could take any of the generic basic classes and you could add a female head to that as well. So we kind of wanted to flesh it out a little bit. Would it be historically accurate to have a large amount of female warriors? Maybe not, but you know what, this is a video game, and we take the less common and make it common, and trying to take, and those are usually the things that are kind of cool.
Anyways, I know we're going for historically plausible, more inspired.
Exactly.
And I have to say, it's very refreshing to see a lot of female faces in Shieldmaiden on the battlefield. So you're mentioning that this is adding new gameplay options to War of the Vikings. So what does the Shieldmaiden do? What's her strengths?
So the main strength is that she's able to carry a special shield that is bigger, and that's only for that class. So it's not like a gender-specific thing, but it's a class-specific thing. She just happens to be a female, represented by a female character model. But it's you have a bit bigger shield, and only that class can carry that. You have a really interesting new special attack, and that special attack, when you hit and hold the F key, you can either left mouse click to initiate a string of thrust attacks. So you'll hold your shield up and thrust attack, which is really great against champions. The Shieldmaiden classes turn out to be a really great competitor to the champion, and kind of really throw things off for them.
Which is the more heavy DPS class.
Exactly. And then there's new things like with the shield up, there's less. The stamina regeneration is faster than other classes. When they put a shield up, it'll be a bit slower for them to regenerate stamina. Another thing is the shield can't be broken. So if you get hit by like a javelin, which tends to break the other shields, it won't break this new shield. And you'll take less damage when you have the shield up. So little small, very small nuance. Yeah, defensive things when you're trying to revive a teammate. You'll put your shield up, and then kind of you can give cover, so you can really kind of, you can be you can even have some strategic elements to the revive, instead of you just reviving and praying that an archer doesn't see you, or somebody with a ranged throwing weapon prepped doesn't catch you off guard.
So you're mentioning that she is more defensive, and one aspect of his new shield, that's a snowflake shield, right? And this is historically inspired in the sense that these shield designs were actually used with having these strengthening iron parts.
Yeah, exactly. So iron workers were, when you were using planks and pieces of wood to create a shield, you had to find other ways of doing it. They had a glue. They had a type of glue that they could make, and they used that, and then they did layering things. They would put, sometimes, cloth or leather or things like that to try and improve their strength and its ability to keep those boards together nice and tight. because that improved the defensive abilities of your shield. And another form came in using iron cross pieces to kind of formulate that. And then, of course, iron workers, there were some that were creative and probably some that weren't necessarily so creative. So those guys kept it simple, and the other guys started adding ornamental things to it and kind of, bringing out a bit of an artistic element to it, which eventually changed. And I cannot pronounce the name of this symbol, but one of the clans actually that's very active in our community uses it, IG.
Yes.
But they started adding new things, and it became also a painted symbol that is reflected on some heraldry now. So it's actually lasted quite a time. But this is, of course, historians kind of trying to piece together the history of something. But that's the kind of the story I've read, where they think that this symbol came from, and then also the shield, they've probably found a few shields that maybe had a representation of this.
So, I mean, I heard that there's a lot of, small inspiries from history. Is there anything else on the Shieldmaiden that is like one of these just nice details they added, taken from real history?
The art, I mean, I would say, I don't know, am I forgetting something? Is the allergies kicking my butt? Are you remembering something?
No,
I
it was
don't
more
remember?
of an open question. I mean, very interesting armor, is very layered. She has the amazing helmet, and Saxon has the one with the boar on it. And
Yeah, well, I mean, the boar is something that's been commonly used as a crest of some form or type. It's been used on heraldry. It was a part of heraldry for, I believe it was it? I can't even remember if it was the Lannisters or the Yorkshire. Well, one of those houses, the House of York or House of Lancaster, I forget exactly which one, they had the boar as part of their heraldry. And for people that are unfamiliar with this animal, I mean, nowadays we go pig, bacon, easy peasy, grease. But these are some formidable animals. And the boar, very unlike the domesticated farm pig, not like Charlotte's Web, these things had tusks, they were angry, they were just evil creatures to a degree, and so they were very represented as strength and power. There's a specific spear, and we have a version of that in both Roses and Vikings, and it basically has a cross guard at the tip of the shield.
the boar spear.
The boar spear, and the reason that it has this is because the boar, when you did stab it with the spear, it didn't stop. Pain didn't hurt it. It would go until it couldn't go, until it was 100% dead.
So it's
until
kind of like the herbivore bear.
dead. Right, so they put that there to actually stop the boar, because often people, if they didn't have the boar spear, it would stab and it would keep going, and it would actually kill them. And then they would both die.
Well, it's logical that you want such an animal in your quest.
Exactly. So that's the historical piece for that. But the Saxon version of the Shieldmaiden, unfortunately is there isn't very much evidence to support that at all. So we kind of took something that is a very much a stretch, and it's like a highborn daughter who basically was able to learn to fight, and then was going out and fighting and kind of going against the grain of that society and that culture from the Saxons' point of view. The Vikings, we have a lot of evidence that points to where this would have been more acceptable. There's writings about, from the Byzantine time period, where the Byzantines had writings where they basically talk about female warriors in the Vikings group, and when their soldiers saw this and they got close to them, it actually freaked them out. So were they the best warriors? Who knows? I will probably never find out if this is the case or not. What we do know is that that's pretty strong, information. They're not going to just make that up. So because they also won, so it's even less reason for them to make stuff up.
If anything, they're really strong in War of the Vikings.
Yeah, they are strong in War of the Vikings, but it is evidence that this happened. If it was for a psychological reason, Vikings were extremely clever. They used a lot of tactics in warfare. It wasn't pure raid, like a lot of history might make one assume, and how the history is presented of the Vikings. But yeah, it's so what we did was we just wanted it, like, if both of these were going into battle, regardless of their gender, how would these people dress to fight and be successful, and what would they wear? What would a defensive player look like? What would they have? They would have a little extra weight. They would take on these things. They would take on these elements. They would protect their body. They would protect themselves. They would be, they have gloves on their hands and stuff, and they're just. We wanted them to look a bit more defensive, like they were
no boob armor.
Exactly, which is completely silly. Well, they didn't really use plated armor anyways, but even if you did do something like that, it would just slide right up.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous fantasy.
Right, and doing that with male armor as well. If you were to take those chains and then you were to add seams into it and stuff, all you do is weaken its ability and you make it less useful. So why would anybody who's going to plans to go out and fight against somebody, why would they do something for cosmetic reasons that would kind of contradict? The only things that we do think they did was sometimes they would dress themselves up. They would do certain small things that didn't affect the performance of their armor to create psychological aspects. I mean, they tried to use a lot of psychological. When we met with the archaeologist, who also wasn't studied extensively Viking combat, mentioned that they would banter each other a lot. There was probably, and it's not even probably enough in Vikings, but they would be talking each other up, and very similar in sports, for example, where it's just a lot of, I don't want to say because I guess we're trying to keep it a wholesome show, but talking.
Yeah. So, moving away from the Shieldmaiden and into the actual Shieldmaiden patch, there's a lot of different new content here. We, for example, added new maps.
Yeah. So there's 2 new maps. There's a map that's kind of set in this very barren kind of snow, lightly snowfallen and just bleak, dark, kind of creepy landscape. It didn't have like a specific setting, but we wanted to feel very Viking-esque, and you can do conquest and pitched battle are the game modes that are able to be played on that map. And then we have a medium-ish map set, like it's supposed to be kind of it's almost a complete contrast to that one, where it's nicer lighting, it's a little bit sunny, and you have this nice little village, and it's got its docks, and it's very fun and pretty, and it feels like a nice place to visit.
We were trying to add kind of a bigger repertoire of different maps to get it to feel different. And
exactly.
It's actually, with launch, we added a map where there's a ravine that I heard we're talking about that could actually take place in Norway. Yeah. Are we looking at other direction or the places than England, other like areas of Viking fighting, going further into the whole historical plausibility or historically inspired area to kind of increase the options we have? Because England can only look in an X amount of ways.
We have a lot of parts of England that we can explore. The east versus the west are substantially different. You have the Isles, you have which had a lot of Viking activity. You have Ireland, which looks vastly different. You have the northern parts of the UK, Scotland, and those areas that could also have great settings. But yeah, it is fun to kind of try and take it a bit more north and kind of give more variety. So there's, especially with the tree types. So I mean, we are looking into that, but we try to keep those areas a bit more loose and try to focus more heavily on the characters and their equipment and stuff, since that's what players will focus on more. But of course, we're not going to have like a skyscraper or something.
Yeah, of course. So this patch also introduced some new balance changes in gameplay mixes. How do we think about balance? Like, what's our take on it?
I think, well, right now, like I think our take on it is we want an imperfect balance. I think if there's never ever going to be a perfect balance, because it's also based on a person's personal skills and their personal abilities. So I think we got to be just very careful. Like, I know a lot of people, I see threads every once in a while talking about the two-handed axe, and to some degrees I agree. It is a very powerful weapon. Compared to the other weapons, it's the only weapon that you can typically get a kill in one hit, and it's 1 to 2 average for that weapon, whereas the other weapons are 2 to 3 average. And so that will make it feel a bit stronger, but you are sacrificing the ability to have a shield that can deflect and take hits from ranged weapons specifically. Whether that's enough of a sacrifice, it's hard to say. I think we're constantly working on netcode. It's a complex game. It'll probably be an ongoing process for the life cycle of the entire product, and ongoing and just always working on that. But I think once we improve those things and we add the next class that's coming up, I think those things might feel a bit more fleshed out. At least for the veteran players who have kind of mastered this, they feel like they've reached their understanding of the basic classes. Shieldmaiden's add a nice new mix to that, and my hope is that the fifth one really kind of brings it full circle, and it really shows a nice rock paper scissor scenario.
All right, so we have gone through the Shieldmaiden update, and there's a lot of new stuff here. As you mentioned, there is another update coming in a not too distant future that we are announcing in another not too distant future. We're going to wrap up here and move on to Europa Universalis 4. So thank you, Gordon, for joining me. Everybody watching the stream, we're going to have a short break, and we are taking in Thomas from the EU4 team, discussing Wealth of Nations, its release date, and a lot of interesting stuff about PDS DLC. So we will see you back shortly.
EU4!